Let's talk about 3 reasons why you're not healing. So, when we think about healing and we've started our journey to healing, we have this idea and this vision in our head of what the healed version of us looks like. And that is exactly what you're supposed to do. You're manifesting who you want to be. You've envisioned it, you have the idea in your head, and you have a focus on becoming that person. Sometimes, though, in the process, we want that healed version to be us right away. So we say, okay, I know I want to be this person, and so I'm going to be this person tomorrow when I wake up. And that's not really the way that healing works. And so then we get frustrated and we stop doing it. It's kind of like when we start a new workout regimen or a new diet, right? The reason that yo-yo dieting exists and the reason why people fall off the workout bandwagon is because they want that instant gratification and those instant results of, I said that I wanted to be healthier. Now that I've made that vision known in my head, it's going to happen. We forget, though, that it's a process. And so when we're thinking about the healing process, just like when we're thinking about that diet regimen or that workout regimen, like, what's the process look like? What are we going to do? What's the plan for when we fall off the bandwagon? What's the plan for when we don't feel like working that day? There has to be some strategy in there. And so one of the reasons why you're not healing is because you've read all the books and you have all the information and now you're intellectualizing it. And what I mean by that is you are internally making sense of all of the things you read, which is a beautiful way to start the healing journey. You read the things, you make sense of the things you read, and you're really comprehending what the material says. And we all know that knowing without acting upon something is not actually doing. So I can know that the best plan for my body is to do high intensity interval training. Like, I know that it's tried and true. I know that it works. I can also know that the best plan for my body is to run because it helps me to release my thoughts and it helps me to really work on that endurance, and my body responds to it. However, knowing that and then not actually doing the HIIT workouts or the running isn't really changing anything. So you're not really going to heal just by knowing the information, which is why the knowing of the information is part of the healing journey, but it's not the whole healing journey. So when you gather that information, if you're just intellectualizing it, if you're just knowing in your brain that it makes sense, but you haven't enacted a plan to put it into action, then you're still sitting there unhealed because the healing happens in the process. And so one of the things that I rested on in the initial phase of my healing journey, which was when I was healing from codependency and people pleasing, was, okay, you're going to pick the top 3 things that are your biggest hindrance right now. And you're going to delve into that information. You're going to really connect the dots on that information. And then you're going to make a plan of strategy. So one of those things was not being able to tell people no. And my process for telling people no was a bit longer than people who don't deal with people pleasing and codependency. But if I was going to heal from it, I had to enact the process. So I would say, okay, when I am met with the opportunity to say yes or no and to make that decision, the first thing that I'm going to do is send the text back or say in the phone conversation, I'll get back to you in whatever the certain time length is. If it's something that I knew I needed to think about for a longer time, I might say, I'll get back to you within 24 hours. If it's something that I knew that I needed to make a decision on fairly quickly, then I would say, I'll get back to you in 20 minutes. If it's something that I knew was an immediate, hey, it needs a right now answer, I would say, I need about 5 minutes. I'm going to get back to you. And so what happens during that time is I process, do you have the capacity in which to do this? Which was part of my strategy. Ask yourself if you have the capacity. Is saying yes to this going to say no to yourself? I ask myself that. And if it meant saying no to me to say yes to someone else, then I already knew that that answer was going to have to be a no. And then another thing that I would ask myself is, what's the worst thing that could happen if you say no? And that question really prepared me for it broke down the emotional intensity of what the person's reaction might be. Later, I may have added some other things. Like if I was dealing with a highly manipulative person, I might say, how is this no going to impact that person, so that I knew what they were going to respond with? Are they going to try to guilt you? Are they going to try to shame you? And it was really a preparation, but it started with the information. So in order to heal, the first part of it is really collecting that information. But after you've collected it, you have to develop a strategy that exists because of it. And then once I healed those first 3 things, then I went down to what other 3 things came up that you can ruminate on the information and then do something about. The second reason why you're not healing is because you're afraid that you won't like the healed version of you. So oftentimes when we're thinking about healing, we really latch on to the us that we are. We know how she operates. We know what she needs. We know what triggers her. We know her through and through. But she's an unhealed version of us, and the healed version of us is an unknown. And we tend to gravitate toward those things in which we know how to deal with. So I know how to deal with the unhealed version of me. What if I don't even like the healed version of me? What if she's not somebody that I know how to experience? What if when healing from codependency, I then become selfish? Which, by the way, side note, that doesn't happen. Being absorbed is very different. Being selfish is very different from being self-aware, which is what happens when you get rid of the codependency. You become self-aware, which is not selfish. Although those manipulative people will tell you that it is, it's not. You have to get comfortable with all versions of you, because what we know to be true is that in life there are going to be numerous versions of you. And if you don't get comfortable with knowing that she's going to change and shape herself and mold herself into the next version of her, you'll stay whatever version of you that you are now forever because of fear. So if you really want to heal, you have to get comfortable with the fact that you might have to adjust to the new version of you. You might have to get to know her and understand her. But none of that is worth you stopping the healing process because of the fear that you've placed on getting to the next phase of you. And then the last reason that you're not healing is because you're relying on the unhealed parts of you. So for years, I dealt with anxiety. And anxiety, if we think about it, is something that we resort to help us do something, whatever it is. And it wasn't until I looked back on this that I realized that my anxiety had helped to fuel my perfectionism. So if I could assess what could go wrong, operate in enough fear and cortisol and convince myself that it was going to go wrong, then I could control all of those variables from going wrong, which we know isn't true, but that's what anxiety tells us. Don't be in the present, be in the future. And if you're in the future, you can really plan for all the things that could go wrong so that you can control what happens in the future. So for all of those years, the anxiety was serving me. Operating in a place with high cortisol helped me to be able to deal with chaotic situations. Operating in a space where I knew all of the negative things that could happen helped me to be able to control what negative things actually did happen. But here's what else it did. Operating in high cortisol makes you completely fatigued for all the other things that you want to experience in life. I was a tired mom. I was a tired teacher. I was tired everywhere I went because I didn't have enough energy to expend to give those things what I needed, because I was expending it all on the anxious thoughts that I was ruminating in of fear of things happening that weren't actually happening. The other thing that it does is you live in a constant loop of experiencing things even if they never happen. So when you're thinking about all the things that could go wrong, your body is experiencing the reaction to all the things that could go wrong, and you live in this constant loop of all the wrong things that could happen, which in turn makes you experience the wrong things 1,000-fold, because most people, when they're not operating through anxiety, won't experience the negative reaction of something going wrong because they haven't thought about it. They only experience it if it actually happens. So it was serving me. It made me feel like I could be more perfect, because perfectionism was another thing that I had to heal from, that I could be more prepared, that I could be more aware if I just continued to be anxious. But it was when I finally said, is it really serving you though? That I was able to let go of it. So when you're thinking about the parts of you that you're really struggling to heal, think about what you're doing with the information that you're gathering. Are you putting a plan in motion? Think about how you can accept and reflect on the new version of you and like her, either the same or even more than the unhealed version of you. And really think about how what you're holding on to, you've convinced yourself that it's serving you, even if it's not. Thank you for tuning in. Look me up on all social media sites and tune in to my podcast, The Peace Podcast, where you get all of your podcasts.